Alright guys, so all these proofs in here, these are angle, side, angle proofs. Okay? Angle, side, angle proofs. So go ahead and mark what you know on these. Okay, again, you're going to kind of go back and review some things. Here I gave you angle bisectors. Why don't you go back and kind of review that. Here I kind of put something a little new in this one, talking about perpendicular angles. Okay? Or perpendicular lines. So we're going to talk about that. That's really the highlight of this one. But go ahead and try these. Use that list of reasons. Again, all these are going to end in angle, side, angle. But again, you could make this angle, angle, side if you talked about third angles theorem right before it. So these proofs, again, could end in two different directions depending on what you talked about before it. But they really should just end in angle, side, angle. If you do angle, angle, side, then that means you're just adding a step. So go ahead, pause the video, try these out. Mark your picture. Alright, so let's mark some things that we know. Let's write up our given. Angle XYZ congruent to angle WZV. Okay, we got segment XY perpendicular to segment YZ. We got segment WV perpendicular to segment ZV. And we got segment YZ congruent to segment VZ. Alright, so we got quite a bit of information in here. So I'm going to go up here and mark some things. We know that XY, YZ, they're perpendicular. That's our perpendicular symbol. We know that WV is perpendicular to ZV. Okay. So there's our perpendicular symbol. We know that YZ is congruent to VZ. So there we go. There's our side. We also know that angle XZY congruent to angle WZV. So there's one of our congruent angles. So all we need is just one more angle. And that's going to come from our perpendicular idea. That's why I'm highlighting in this one. So the thing that you need to understand is when you have perpendicular angles, okay, or perpendicular lines, excuse me, not angles. Perpendicular lines, that means that you also have right angles. So angle Y, and I can just name it for one angle because there's only one angle Y there, and angle V are right angles. Okay, and you need to state that. This symbol does not mean right angle. Well, it kind of does, but it means perpendicular, which means that you have right angles. Okay, and since this is perpendicular, that means that we have right angles because that's what it means to be a right angle. So the idea that when you have perpendicular, that's what it means to be perpendicular. That's why you have right angles. So when you have perpendicular lines, things that you should be telling me is that you have right angles because of the definition of perpendicular. And the reason why we said that we have these right angles is because we just talked about it earlier in a problem when I gave you angle 1 and angle 2 were right angles. Because you have right angles, you know that these angles have to be congruent because of the right angle congruence theorem. All right angles are congruent. So that's why I gave you the perpendicular, because I want you to see this kind of flow of thinking. If you're perpendicular, then you have right angles because you're perpendicular. And if you are right angles, you are congruent, which gives us our last angle because of the right angle congruence theorem. So now you can see that we got our angle, side, angle. So we know our triangles are congruent. So the reason for this proof up here is because I needed to see that from perpendicular, you got to talk to me about right angles. And from right angles, you got to tell me that they're congruent. Okay? And it all works out. All right, down here. So we got just a review of bisecting again. So segment PR bisects angle QPS and angle QRS. That's given. Okay, so now you got to get me to my triangles. I need two angles that are congruent and one side that's congruent. Well, if you quickly look at the picture, you already see the side that's congruent. It should be PR, segment PR, congruent to segment PR, reflexive. So we know that that's congruent on both of them. And then now we just work with our bisector. QPS is being bisected. PR is cutting it in half. So that means I know that these angles have to be congruent. So angle QPR has to be congruent to, we'll match it up, SPR. To angle SPR. And that's because of the definition of an angle bisector. Because that's what was being bisected. Okay, and by that same reason, I can do my other angle, because there were two angles that were bisected in here, QPS and QRS. So this giant angle over here was also cut in half. So I know that these two angles had to be the same. So angle QRP has to be congruent to angle SRP. By that same reason, because an angle bisector was cut in half. And now you can see in my picture that, oh yeah, this is angle side angle. So my triangle PQR, congruent to triangle PSR. Done.